just like drinking water.
It's just like breathing air. It's like doing nothing at all.
Hey guys, this is Thomas Panner, Coda, and my boy Perry. This is the Torture Time. We're here to learn stuff, talk about deep, cool stuff. Tonight, we're going to talk about science. And the reason why is because, as I've said a lot all through all this, we're building up an understanding of how we got from logic, epistemology, to linguistics and semantics, to the philosophy of science, to science. So now we're going to start covering things about what science is. We're accepting a physicalist, reductionist standpoint. We're assuming that everything can be judged by science in the way that we do it here. But we're not positing absolute truth. I don't think any good scientist, and I think everybody here agrees with me in this room, absolute certainty is something I can't deal with. I don't know what that is. Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, so the one thing that I'm a hyper skeptic, right? So I agree that there's most likely nothing absolute that we could at least attain. The one proposition that I've been trying to work on that is certain, there is something. Those three words. That's my tentative attempt for certainty, but you're right, for the most part, it's probably unattainable.
I'm going to say I can't deal with it. It's kind of one of those admissions of saying, I don't know if maybe, but how would I know what certainty?
What's the criteria that
I don't
you
know
refer to?
Exactly.
It's like something intangible. It's like a cloud.
Yeah. Intangible is a good way to put it. So basically, this is for people viewing now and in the future and everything. So we're still going on our series. Let's just start talking about what science is, okay? Mostly I'm going based off my notes that I've taken from a website called, what's the name of that website? Lumen Learning has an entire textbook on science, and that's pretty much what I'm going with. But I'm also reading from Wikipedia. So if you want to follow along on Wikipedia, just search up science. We'll cover the history a little bit. I'm not going to go through everything, but right now I'm just going to run down what it is, okay? So science is the rigorous, systematic endeavor that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of testable explanations and predictions about the future in the world. Modern science is typically divided into three major branches: the natural sciences, such as biology, chemistry, and physics, which study the physical world and physics; the social sciences, economics, psychology, sociology, anthropology, things that study individuals and societies and cultures. And then there are formal sciences, things like logic and mathematics and theoretical computer science and, you name it. Any formal system can be a form of a formal science. You have formal systems like in logic, where you have an axiomatic system that gives you rules to adhere to within the system. But in a formal science, it's dealing with all of that plus more specificity. We'll get into more of what formal sciences are later in the series, but just for now, understand that formal systems, they are governed by an axiomatic system that then have theorems derived from those axioms. So there is disagreement on these three branches about what people think about it. Some people think, well, there's more branches than that. Okay, well, some people think, well, there's actually only one branch of science. We're not going to take a side. We're just going to assume that it's all science, right? Psychology is no less important than physics, then mathematics is important to economics. That it all matters. It's all science to me. But you could argue that there needs to be more separation between the three. Maybe there needs to be extra criterions. What do you guys think? Do you think there's any other way to divide it up?
Yeah, go ahead, Coda.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that it's cool. I think it's pretty valid to cast it all under a scientific umbrella. I mean, I think there's valid distinctions within it, and when people, I guess when people are arguing over what gets to hold the title of science, it's like it's a battle for validity. It's a battle for attitude, right? Mm-hmm. But I think those battles would be better fought on their own merits rather than based on whether or not something qualifies as science or any other sort of term.
Right. No,
Yeah, one culture might consider one culture's idea of science will be different than another culture's idea of science.
that's right. Well, we'll get into that a little bit.
Uh, I I find it interesting. You know how you were talking about the people who say, "Oh, well, there's this kind of science and there's that kind of science." Right?
Mm-hmm.
Universities in America, at least, for example, psychology is a humanity rather than a science.
Isn't that weird?
Per-
I think that's
Perhaps
fucking
something to
weird.
keep in mind. Yeah,
It,
but
it,
it's a
it is
social
a hard and
science,
a
which she
soft.
said.
It's a
So,
hard and a soft. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
well, the hard would be
you. Neuroscience.
toward the spectrum of neuroscience or
Yes.
neurochemistry or
Yes.
neurobiology, right?
Yeah, correct.
So, and that's a natural science, is what we
I would
categorize
agree
it
with
as.
you. I would
So-
agree with you, but it falls under
Right.
neuropsychology, which
Oh, that's an
neuropsychology
interesting one.
under.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
It's all what the nomenclature. We don't. It doesn't really matter. That's I think.
That'd be the
Yeah.
halfway mark on the spectrum,
Mhm.
neuropsychology.
On one side you have like psychoanalysis, and you move to the other side, and you get to
Yeah.
behaviorism, and eventually like neuroscience.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're right. That is perfectly right.
That's
so-
my favorite kind of psychology.
Yeah,
Love it.
I mean, I love psychoanalysis. I think it can give us insights. I think I can get like Lacan. He has good insights into psychoanalysis. What was it? James Lacan? I think it's James Lacan. Anyway,
I don't know who that is.
cool
We'll have to talk about him.
Yeah, in the 50s, he was a cool psychodynamicist, psychoanalysis guy. He was. I think he's one of the last ones to really practice it in a university. I'm not sure. There probably still are practicing psychoanalysts. Anyway, doesn't matter.
You're talking to
Yeah.
one.
Doesn't matter. It's okay. Yeah, psychoanalyzing is fine. We can all do it. We all try to do it. Who cares?
I think.
No, go ahead, Coda. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think if there's any like parts of science that are like the most debatably not science, maybe it lies in like psychoanalysis based on introspection. Lots of economics, theorizing is like kind of shaky, and then also I'd say probably on the outskirts. Then you have like theories within sociology, which like itself contests scientific epistemology, are arguably not science.
Or things like flat Earth theory. Those are obviously like so far on the outskirts of science that it's beyond fringe. You know what I mean?
That's a
Yeah.
perfect example. I mean, it is really just the epitome of only theory and no practice.
Yeah.
There's no correlation to the practice in which it states.
We can hypothesize about anything.
Um,
I mean, anything we want to metaphysically.
right.
I don't see a limit. Does anybody
That's
see a limit on
everything
what,
to do.
is there any limit on what we can actually hypothesize, do you think? Or can we just make up any scenario?
The limit is the words that we make up, essentially. And right?
Yes.
I mean, we can say anything, blobbity blue bop, flibbity jib.
Yep.
Right? That
Sure.
could mean the most philosophical thing in 2,000 years from now.
Yep.
That's true.
Somebody's gonna watch this fucking video and use what you just said. in 2000 years.
That's
And
true.
You're gonna be like worshipped like Jesus.
I'll be
Yeah.
a prophet. Right?
Yeah, you'll be the final prophet of God again.
Yeah, that's like some
What
philosophy.
wise words.
Yeah, it
Final
is funny
Sorry.
how some philosophy seems to genuinely like go there. Like with some like Zen koans, like a master is asked a metaphysical question, he just responds like "moo," and you're supposed to get something from that.
You know what that reminds me of? Shoot. I feel bad. That reminded me of Del Su, and I told Del Su that I'd let him know next time we have I'll do it next week.
Okay.
Anyway.
He
Gotta
wanted
invite
to-
Dalsu on the show. Yeah.
Did he want to be
But
here?
that made me think.
Invite him?
Yeah, if you could, since you're a
Yeah,
bit
let me
more
send-
technologically
me a message.
apt at the moment.
Yeah, I got you. Let's see. Where is his name? Sorry, guys. Pause for us. I'm going to send our friend Dalsu so that we can talk to him.
But yeah, Coda, that's
What up?
exactly what Del would do. He'd say moo or something. Yeah, or just
Moo.
silence, right? Silence is the most wise one person could get.
Yeah. let the world be their answer.
All right, we'll see what he says in a minute.
I was gonna say,
Go ahead.
speaking of psychoanalysis
Mm-hmm.
and what we're talking about, like random just words and nonsense.
Right.
In Germany, the German philosophers, Wissenschaft is what science is, but Wissenschaft doesn't just include the natural sciences and what we do. It included literature, religion, art. So all of those things were also considered a Wissenschaft, a science.
Mm-hmm.
This was again back in like the times of Freud in Germany. So it's interesting though to see the differentiation of cultures and how they apply science. Right?
Yeah. If we go back far enough, everything is called
Science.
philosophy.
Right.
Everything is
And
natural philosophy.
Right, and I
Exactly,
find
right.
that very, very interesting. Like, yeah, so because like, what is science if not like the observations we can collect consistently across people, sort of across time a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas literature, the arts, they represent one observation. Where it could. You're basically still portraying a reality, reflecting on reality, describing it. It's just at a different level, at a different layer of scope.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that there is something to those concepts being deeply interrelated,
I think
where they're all
that
just accounts.
I think you're right. Like, you can't remove that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you have a response on that, Perry?
Yes, absolutely. Not only is it just another form of expressing life, but some people believe it's the most fundamental way that we could express our experience here in life as a human condition. And then it gets more specified and scientific and analytical from there.
Yeah, because I don't want to get too much into philosophy of science.
No,
but,
it's okay, because we can look at things like literature. That's totally fine. You know what I mean? Because you can't
because like
pull that string out or it unravels the tapestry.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, because to an extent, philosophy, to an extent, like science is like kind of a lowest common denominator reality, right? It's the reality where we can all agree that it's there because we all observe it very consistently, or at least the vast majority of us.
Right.
Right. So it's really just, but it's all just reflections on reality,
Right.
That's a good thing to bring up, I feel like, on the first show of science.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be focusing more so on Western science rather than Eastern or European Eastern? Or
I'm going to cover some of the history tonight, and we will talk a little bit about. I may start with like Middle Ages, because we all know what science was in the ancient world. It was philosophy. It was philosophy,
Gotcha.
right? I mean, we can look at. We can talk about that in a moment. I'm going to kind of go over it really quick here and just
wondering if we were going to specify one side of the world.
No,
another,
we will try to. I'm going to try to include it all, but it is a lot to cover. So
sure,
it's a lot to cover.
Up to you. Yeah. Just figured it'd be a good thing to consider.
It is. It is a good thing to consider.
Whatever. It's up to you, man.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Coda, did you want to say something else about how you're perceiving it?
No, I mean, I don't really have that much to say. I mean, I think science is, a great tool.
Yeah.
Remember, we're assuming science is pretty rad.
We're assuming physicalism here. We're putting on our physicalist hats and our pragmatist hats, and we're saying, let's assume that the reduction of ontology of science works, and that it's not just a language game. Which I hope that it's not just a language game, because then it's who knows what it is. It's just semantics. But
it's a language game that seems to prove itself.
It does.
I don't think I don't think it's a big deal if it is a language game.
Okay.
Because it seems like whether metaphysically it is or it isn't, it seems like we know how to categorize to such an extent where it's useful and practical.
Yeah.
And I think that those seemings are just fine, whether it actually is or not. The seemings work.
Those seemings are correct, and I agree with them.
Yeah.
So let's real quick. let's say, okay, so the history of scientific discipline spans the majority of the entire record of humanity, with the earliest written records of identifiable predecessors to modern science dating to the Bronze Age Egypt and Mesopotamia from around 3000 to 1200 BCE. Their contributions to mathematics, astronomy, and medicine entered and shaped the Greek natural philosophy of classical antiquity, whereby formal attempts were made to provide explanations of events in the physical world based on natural causes. While further advancements, including the introduction of the Hindu Arabic numeral system, were made during the Golden Age of India. Uh, Scientific research deteriorated in these regions after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, burning of Alexandria, shit like that. During the early Middle
Yeah, that was tough.
during the
Fuck,
early
I
Middle
forgot about
Ages,
that.
400
R.I.P.
to 100 excuse me, 400 to 1000 CE, Common Era, is the middle the mid oh my god, medieval Renaissances. Uh,
Hmm.
Scholarship flourished again under that. Some Greek manuscripts lost in Western Europe were preserved and expanded upon in the Middle East during the Islamic Golden Age, and later by the efforts of Byzantine Greek scholars who brought Greek manuscripts from the dying Byzantine Empire to Western Europe during the Renaissance, which is interesting. Um,
Quick
yeah,
question.
go ahead.
Renaissance is 14th to 17th century
Yes,
AD. What
yes.
what's the Islamic Golden Age? What time period is that
Let's
from?
let's look and see. 8th to 13th century.
Okay, cool.
So
And then it
700s to
led into
1200s. Yeah.
Renaissance.
So that's when like they did all the math. They came up with the zero. I think I'm right about that. Am I right about that? Let's look it
I
up
don't
real
know.
quick. Who came up with the concept zero? Who came up with the number? I have to say number, even though is it a number? Around 1200 AD. Oh, no, excuse me. The number zero was first defined by the Indian astronomer and mathematician Brahmagupta in 628. He used small dots under
628.
numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, 628. It said is used small dots under numbers to represent zero. He also recognized zero as a number with a null value called sunya. So he was the first to show that subtracting a number from itself results in zero. Okay, so 628. That's pretty cool. All right, let's go back to what I was talking about. We're gonna go to.
Uh,
Uh, we already read about that. We already understand that for science, all the sciences came from the basically the scientific revolution, which was right before the Enlightenment, and Renaissance was right after and during the scientific revolution. So, if Leonardo da Vinci had lived another 100 years, he probably would have been in the leading the scientific revolution, most likely. Um, so, where the hell was I just at? Okay, there we go. The recovery and assimilation of Greek works and Islamic inquiries into Western Europe from the 10th to 13th century revived natural philosophy, which was later transformed by the scientific revolution that began in the 16th century as new ideas and discoveries departed from the previous Greek conceptions and traditions. That's very important that everybody held to the Greek standards. Isn't that crazy?
well, and I don't know if they're definitely incorporating Aristotle.
Mm,
Aristotle was read as art and literature and poetry for the longest time.
yeah,
Um, and then so I don't know if that's what they're referring to is like Aristotle specifically with his logic and
probably,
um,
probably.
well, I guess Platonists are real math geeks. It was what's his name, the guy who
Pythagoras?
sacrificed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's probably a lot of what they're considering also with Greek culture is Pythagoras and his stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
and he did it with sticks in his fingers. Very interesting.
yeah,
No computers, no anything to nothing. He just mathematics. That's why I think mathematics is intuited. In terms of the philosophy of mathematics, I think that we intuit mathematics because we are nature, and it would only make sense to be able to intuit nature, and so that's how we intuit it. That process of the order of operations and things like that. That what makes mathematics work, the axioms. We intuit those things, and then we build upon them. That's just my idea, but it may be also socially constructed simultaneously. So,
Do you think Pythagoras was doing that in an analytical, axiomatic way, or was he just was he observing certain things and then came to certain abstractions
I think he
inductively?
was just coming to certain abstractions. I think he was just getting the gist of it. I mean, he wouldn't understand how the triangle fit into other forms of geometry.
This is
So,
why I think that math, though it may be a non-nominalist system, it may be more abstract, I still think that it is human-made after we empirically observe something. We don't get it strictly through rationalization. I don't want to tangent onto the philosophy of math and whatnot.
no, I mean, we have to have, remember, we have to have the a posteriori and the a priori together to understand math.
Both. You're right. You're right.
Yeah, you have to be able to consider that this and this makes this, and then you have to understand the equal sign and the need for what addition is. You know what I mean? All these axioms that we accept because they reflect nature so well, and you build physics off of the mathematics and these models. So anyway, let's jump into this real quick, and we'll talk. Excuse me. We will be getting into by the way, everybody, we will be getting into the scientific methodology, but I kind of wanted to really separate that and explain it along with philosophical skepticism, both of those methodologies together in order to understand science better. We're going to cover that next time. I'm going to try to stay to the simple things this time as best we can. I guess we could read about the etymology of it, but I'm not really terribly thinking that matters.
Sceince.
Sceince.
Holy shit.
Oh, Pokevo said hello.
Hello,
Pokevo.
Hello, Pokevo. You still drunk?
True.
No, that's awesome. We're happy you're here. That's interesting. It does
what's
say
next after the scientific revolution.
Yeah, let's go past that. I was gonna say, science has no actual real origin. We don't know when it first started because there may be scientists doing their thing that were never written about in Sumeria. So there's no reason to go back that far.
For sure.
We'll skip the Renaissance because I think everybody kind of understands what the Renaissance was. I mean, we can explain it real quick. Let's see.
I mean, yeah, go ahead because I have a vague idea, but not good enough to teach it.
So Age of Enlightenment came after the Scientific Revolution. Let's remember that. Okay, so go ahead if you want to, and then I'll read what it says about the Scientific Revolution.
No, you read what it says.
Okay. The Scientific Revolution was a series of events that marked the emergence of modern science during the early modern period, which is beginning of the fall of Constantinople, 1453. That's interesting. When developments in mathematics, physics, astronomy especially, biology, human anatomy, and chemistry transforms the views of society about nature. So the scientific revolution took place in Europe in the second half of the Renaissance period, with the 1543 Copernicus publication, I can't pronounce that, on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres, often cited as its beginning. So a lot of people already know that, but we're just going back over it. The era of the scientific renaissance, which is mixed in with it, focused to some degree on recovering the knowledge of the ancients, Greek ancients, and is considered to have culminated in Isaac Newton's 1687 publication, Principia, which formulated the laws of motion and universal gravitation, the basis for calculus, along with Leibniz, thereby completing the synthesis of some new cosmology. The subsequent Age of Enlightenment, which we'll talk about in a minute, saw the concept of scientific revolution emerge in the 18th century work of Bailey, who described a two-stage process of sweeping away the old and establishing the new. There continues to be scholarly engagement regarding the boundaries of the scientific revolution in terms of years and its chronology. So, that's that part. That's what the scientific revolution is. Let's jump after that and talk about the Enlightenment. Does anybody want to comment on the scientific revolution or anything about that? What I just read?
It's like humanity is just like a story, like an anime.
Do you look at it like Thomas Kuhn looks at it?
Well, I mean, you kind of have to. I mean, you're talking about Copernican and his revolution on the heavenly bodies, and then
Mm-hmm.
Newton with his Principia, and
Mm-hmm.
like these are just crucial parts of the plot, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, it's so nice just to listen to. It's like it's a story.
Everybody, this is the main thing to take away from what all I've read about science. Everybody was trying to learn from the ancient Greeks. They were always holding in some kind of importance about the ancient Greek way of thinking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Up until the age of the Enlightenment and afterwards, the only type of logic that was used was like Aristotelian logic, predicate calculus. You know, where you just had uh, or a syllogism is basically all they had. They had syllogisms to argue with. They didn't have like this high order function logic where you had different variables and different logical connectives and all this shit. They didn't have all that. So that branched out afterwards. So that's why everybody, they didn't worship Aristotle and Plato and Socrates and all the schools after. They just apparently during these years between sometime in 1400 to like 1900, people were just obsessed with the Greeks. That's how our nation was formed.
Interesting. Yeah.
Obsessing about the Greek culture was how we came to the idea of a democratic republic. So very interesting.
Even though it was Plato shitting on the idea of democracy.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
But yeah, everything played like a crucial role, right? And everyone kind of worked off of Copernican, and then they worked off of Newton, and then Descartes with his right.
Yes.
Well, I won't spoil anything.
No, it's okay.
Indubitably.
Go ahead.
The what's it called? His Cartesian origin point, the 0, thing, where and now you have an axis of 3 dimensions.
Yeah, the Cartesian coordinate plane,
which he was inspired by Newton, and then Leibniz and Newton or whoever was it Newton? Yeah, Leibniz and Newton got calculus. Got calculus from the Cartesian coordinate system.
Correct. Correct.
Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but keep going.
It's okay. You can all you want to. Coda, did you want to say something?
No, I don't have much to say. I think you guys are covering it pretty well.
Are you enjoying this? I mean, this is we can talk more than I'm just sitting here reading. I'm always down to talk about whatever. So
no, this is a chill vibe.
Okay, good.
Coda, you're so fucking smart. Like, I just want to tell you that.
You really are, Coda.
Thank you, dog.
You have a brilliant mind.
Yeah.
I love talking to you.
Thank you.
So let's go to the Age of the Enlightenment. At the start of the Age of the Enlightenment, and people say it is 17th, 18th centuries?
18th century, yeah, late 17th.
So 1600s to 1800s. How's that sound?
Kant. Think of Kant.
Yeah, sure. Kant was the end, or right in the middle. He would have been right in the middle of the Age of the Enlightenment.
This was that time in history when those grand moral edifices were getting saved. By Kant himself, the man.
Kant, yeah. Well,
the moral calculator, Kant.
It's interesting
the nowhere.
because Kant was in a scientific, Age of the Enlightenment kind of guy, but he was also a romantic, and I don't want to get into romanticism, but yeah, I think
he
of
was
Kant,
the first real idealist.
Yeah. Yep.
The father.
Yeah, all the other Germans took the Kantian view. But yeah, Hume and Kant, somewhere around that transition period, I guess the Age of Enlightenment really went on its way.
Were they, because it's adding Isaac Newton and Leibniz into the Age of Enlightenment, and that would have been in the late 1600s. So I thought Kant was late 1700s.
Interesting. Yeah, well, Hume died 1776 and was born early 1700. So yeah.
Rest in peace, a legend.
Him and Kant would have been Enlightenment philosophers.
So I just call it 18th century. Late 17th century. I think we're right in saying that.
Yep, I would say late 17th century to 18th century.
You could even say Descartes is a father of modern science and the Age of Enlightenment.
Completely, yeah.
Absolutely.
So he was early 1600s.
Scientific skepticism is super Cartesian.
So, it is. The way that we employ you're right, both of you. The way that you employ the skepticism as a methodology along with the scientific methodology is the reason why it works so well, because skepticism isn't about just questioning everything all the time. It is a way of systematically doubting things, systematically, academically, so that you can question anything at any time and find an answer that is more likely true than not. You are attempting to be as correct as you can possibly be. And that means doing everything honestly, recognizing your cognitive biases. We'll go through the scientific methodology. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and read this. It says, at the, at the start of the Age of the Enlightenment, Isaac Newton formed the foundation of classical mechanics with Principia, greatly influencing future physicists. Leibniz incorporated terms from Aristotelian physics, now used in a non-teleological way. This implied a shift in the view of objects. Objects were now considered as having no innate goals. Leibniz assumed that different types of things all work according to the same general laws of nature, with no special formal or final causes. So it was basically Leibniz and Newton were coming up with the ideas of like space time. You know what I mean? They were making the philosophy of space and time by talking about it between themselves. They had not a consortium, but what is it? A correspondence? They had correspondence with each other.
Yeah.
And they argued a lot about whether it was absolutism or whatever their general views of the philosophy of space and time were. It was very metaphysical what they were arguing about. But it says, during this time, the declared purpose and value of science became producing wealth and inventions that would improve human lives in the materialistic sense of having more food and clothing and all that stuff. In Francis Bacon's words, quote, the real and legitimate goal of science is the endowment of human life with new inventions and riches, end quote. He discouraged scientists from pursuing intangible philosophical or spiritual ideas, which he believed contributed little to human happiness beyond the fume of subtle, sublime, or pleasing speculation. That was another of his quotes. The fume of subtle, sublime, or pleasing speculation. What do you have to say about that, Coda? I think you might. What do you think about Bacon's words there?
I mean, I think ultimately your attitude towards your possessions has a lot to do, obviously, with how you're feeling in life, not just what you have,
Yes.
Right. So, I guess I sort of disagree with that. But
I disagree with Bacon too, because I don't think
Yeah.
that philosophy is just quietism and us mentally jerking off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe some of it. Maybe some of it. To go ahead.
I would agree with the anti-spiritual aspect of trying to figure out, like we said, we got to realize that we're physicalists as we're speaking about this.
Mhm.
So unless you're equivocating physicalism with spirituality, there's probably no room for spirituality within a scientific method, Western or Eastern.
Could you do science as a neutral monist and call that spirituality?
I mean, you could call spirituality whatever you want. And if I call spirit just like reason and speech and whatever, and
Right.
some woo-woo idea, then yeah, but I don't know what the conventional view of spiritual is. I guess something in essence that isn't physical is probably more so the conventional understanding.
Right, like a consciousness.
I believe that there is such a thing. Well, I tentatively believe that there is such a thing as some kind of essence to something, but I don't know how to define essence or spiritual. I don't really, but besides referring to each other, or maybe the word transcendental, not necessarily the Kantian, but the more pop culture.
Right.
I don't know. What do you think?
The only thing that is essence is space. And since space would need another, and this could just be a Kantian a priori thing that us humans do, and it doesn't actually exist. But if anything is an essence, it is that which forms matter. And what forms matter? Both space and, I usually equivocate,
Causality.
gravity.
I would say
gravity, causality, speed of light, all of those things. It was Carnap in the early 1900s that created this word physicalism, because it wasn't just materialism. There were these, energy, gravity.
That's right. There were the laws
all
of physics.
These,
That's
right.
why it moved from materialism to physicalism. You're right.
that's what I would equivocate with essence, is those things that are physical but not material.
What about the way that that science and physics looks at information?
I don't know much about that. I know you know a lot about that, and how,
We're
you know,
gonna have to
the
study it because we love it.
black hole paradox, or the holographic principle, or something. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
Information can't or can escape under some circumstance. I don't know. But
It
we'll learn about
information
it.
may be saved, it may be lost, or it may be something that we don't know. So it's a really big question in physics, because they treat, and this is important to talk about on a science show, because physicists look at information differently than you or I would look at information. Their term for information is like the shit that's there to allow things to do what they do, to allow carbon atoms and water atoms to form.
Mm.
That,
An
you know,
entelechy,
molecules,
as Aristotle. There's
Yes.
an entelechy within an acorn to become an oak tree.
Yeah.
There's some
There's no
information in that
agency
acorn.
to this information that they're talking
Right.
about. They're just talking about some kind
Right.
of,
Yeah.
firmware or something like that. That it may.
Yeah. You mean, you could look at entelechy as that also, not necessarily a mind. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of people did. Hegel did this. Hegel was a guy who equivocated the physical stuff of reality. Well, I take that back. He didn't. They permeated with each other, and they overlapped, but they were distinct from each other still.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Distinct
going
but
to get into Hegel.
interrelated.
I'm not going to get into Hegel right now.
No. Go ahead. If you guys want to.
No. Trust me. Like, no. Like, it's not worth
Yeah,
it.
I was gonna say, I think that, I'm thinking about that that sort of like skepticism towards like, like woo woo spiritualism, philosophical proliferation. I There's some things in me that like are like, yeah, like maybe quietism is like kind of true in lots of ways, but in the sense, I feel like sorts of like painting pictures of our world, conceptualizing, trading ideas about it. I think it's like part of what makes us human. And I don't know if it necessarily needs to serve anything else, but I think also philosophy can, right? Regardless of whether or not we can know if something is true or false. Once we see a statement regarding it as true or false, certainly will change how we proceed in our actions.
Yes.
And so in that sense, it does come to a sort of relevance, especially one who wanted certain answers.
Well said as fuck.
Certainty is really weird, isn't it? I mean, it's just, again, we could just look at it as a Wittgensteinian word.
Scientists are searching for that very thing all the time, and they know, and the honest ones know that they can't possibly reach it, right?
It's the same thing with God. Like, how do you define God in order to know whether it's there or not?
Right.
It's the same. I mean, you have this issue with everything, pretty much.
We have a book. We have a book, my good sir. I'm sorry, but we have a book to describe that.
Unironically, it's not good enough still. Like, what the words that are in there are still, you're going to go with Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and like, what's this word mean? What's this statement mean?
Yep, right? Exactly. We'll break it down to its very base proofs, and look, it falls apart,
Yeah.
What is the initial...
Anything in this physical reductionism, Gödel's incompleteness theorems applies to break them down to basically nothing. Anyway, go ahead, Cody.
I was going to say, Joshua Drost asks, what is the initial starting point for this physicalist worldview, or I guess physicist worldview? Would you, I think, oh, sure. Well, I was going to ask, you did a whole series in like the philosophy of science, right? So I was wondering if maybe you could break that down historically.
Briefly, Joshua, whether we like to, me and Thomas like to differentiate it, anti-real and real when we come to our scientific worldview. Are we an anti-scientist, or no, anti-realist, or a realist?
It's scientifically real or scientifically anti-real.
And regardless of whatever side you start on, you can do the same physics. He's asking about physicists specifically.
Yeah, I mean,
you can do the same science, whatever first principle you start with.
Exactly. Some scientists start with constructive empiricism. You know what I mean? On the anti-real side, but they still think that there's a mind-independent reality. They just say that all of the stuff that we know about the mind-independent reality is a social construction of models, which I agree with. I don't know if we can know anything past that.
what undergirds those two positions. This is the problem of the third man. There's no criteria
There's no
that we
criteria.
can use to justify our criteria that we're using. I say it's pragmatism. It's that which is useful.
So then we're all
There's
instrumentalists then, right?
Would we say? Oh yeah, I'm an instrumentalist. I don't know about you guys.
I take the
I lean
position
toward-
on whatever applies best to a given scenario. I'm a particularist, I would say.
Yeah,
Oh
me too.
sure.
I mean, I will use correspondence and get in towards the scientifically real side. If I were doing a real scientific experiment with other people, I would assume that my senses are going to give me the best estimation of what might likely be happening in reality. But I'm not going to be absolute about it. Anybody who I was around that was like, "Yep, we're 1-to-1 seeing reality here," I would just be like, "You're insane," because we're not. There's so much
Right.
phenomenology to go through, we can't even begin to talk about it. So
We don't know that no one can
Yeah.
know. We're almost certain that no one can know.
yeah,
And I mean, we're not. I mean, you might be the prophet, capital P prophet, and you yourself may know Joshua, and perhaps you could enlighten us with. Seems like you may want to get
Mm-hmm.
something out. Which go ahead and call in if you'd like as well.
yep.
But
Right.
we're not. We're fallibilists. We're almost certain the best way to go about any endeavor, a scientific or
What is the mantra that that Travis keeps chanting at us?
certainty is almost certainly unattainable. Almost, keyword. Certainty is
Right.
almost certainly unattainable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keyword almost.
What do you think about that, Coda?
What do I think about that? I
Does
feel
it make
like
sense, or is it not? Is it not rigorous enough?
I think it makes sense. I think personally, I kind of have a view of like there's this Eastern distinction between like absolute and relative truth.
Yeah.
The absolute truth is just like what is apparent, what is there, whether or not you regard it as true, right? Just like the phenomena in front of your eyes, etc., etc. But this sort of relative truth is can be for me at least. My model of it would be sort of a how do I say this? Like a relativist or a particularist sort of pragmatism, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
No, I get it.
Right, right. We regard things as true relative to our goals. Truth is an
Mhm.
attitude towards a thing, which,
Mhm.
yeah, right, which corresponds to action.
Yes. Good way to put it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so did you have a something? Did you want to talk about? I'm not looking at the screen because I'm looking at my reading screen. Perry, did you
Oh
have
yeah, yeah.
something to respond
No,
to?
let's go next. See
Okay.
what else is on the menu.
So let's talk about a little bit more into the Enlightenment. So science during the Enlightenment was dominated by scientific societies and academies, which had largely replaced church universities as centers of scientific research and development. Societies and academies were the backbones of the maturation of the scientific profession. So how it moved along, how it matured through years. Another important development was the popularization of science among an increasingly literate population. That would have been a huge thing, right? During this time, people would understand, oh shit, if I become literate, I can learn things off of a piece of paper, put that into pragmatic action, get something out of it that makes my life better in some actual way, in some physical, tangible way. Um, Enlightenment philosophers chose a short history of scientific predecessors, Galileo, Boyle, and Newton mainly, as the guides to every physical and social field of the day. That's what they thought back then. The 18th century saw significant advancements in the practice of medicine and physics, the development of biological taxonomy, excuse me, a new understanding of magnetism and electricity with Maxwell and his equations,
Mm-hmm.
the maturation of chemistry as a discipline. Ideas of human nature, society, and economics evolved during the Enlightenment. Hume and other Scottish Enlightenment thinkers developed a treatise of human nature, which
Go.
was expressed historically in works by authors including James Burnet, Adam Ferguson, John Millar, William Robertson, all whom merged a scientific study of how humans behaved in ancient and primitive cultures with a strong awareness of the determining forces of modernity, I guess, as like a comparison. Modern sociology largely organized from this movement that I just discussed. So in 1776, Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations, which is often considered the first work on modern economics. So that actually happened during the Enlightenment. And of course, we
Social
also
science.
yeah the formulation of our government, of the United States government, as being of the Greeks, built upon the Greek ideology.
It just keeps going back to ancient Greece.
Everybody wants to go back to that in everything that they do. I'm sure 1,000 years down the line, people are still going to be obsessing about what the ancient Greeks were talking about, because it was the first. It was the first of everything. So,
Yeah, Hume is the goat, except for Plato.
Funny thing, Tart said to me that he thinks Plato was the real genius.
Yeah, no, I've been saying this for like 89% of my philosophical career.
That
Like
he was the genius.
everything that you could find almost everything in the Republic. Somehow in the Republic, it's great. Or I'm sorry, in any of his dialogues with empiricism and knowledge, like in the Meno, like you always talk about,
Yep.
like how in justification, a justified truth, what makes it justified. He was talking about seeing shit and empiricism and tasting and all of this,
Yeah, he
right?
was doing science. He was doing dialectical science. Socrates was.
Yet we call Hume, Berkeley, and Locke the fathers of empiricism, right? It's like,
Yeah.
Okay, well, Plato's the grandfather then.
He has to be, or they have to be like the ancient ones, with the beards down to the fucking ground.
Well, that's an interesting one because I'm assuming everyone's referring to Plato and Aristotle, but they could also be referring to the pre-Socratics.
Yeah, like Eratosthenes and
Well, let's see.
Heraclitus, Parmenides,
Anaximander,
Anaximander.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, 2 or 3 Zenos. I can't remember them all now.
And that's
Yeah.
that's. I don't know if I lumped that in with the Socratic era. I don't know. Honestly, it was like 400. It was like 300 years before Socrates.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm assuming. I don't know. I guess we'll keep that in mind as we're.
I can look it up at some point.
Well, yeah. If they refer back to it again, we'll see. I wish they'd tell us like who they're referring back to specifically.
It doesn't say, but I would imagine that they're even probably going back to the post-Socratic stuff, like Hellenistic philosophy. You know what I mean? They could be going.
That's why they're called the post and pre-Socratics, because it wasn't the Socratic era.
That's right. Everything from post-Socratic came from Socratic, because they were all, Plato probably had thousands of students. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Well, maybe not thousands. I don't know. He was big.
Oh, yeah. That's probably not a bad guess. I don't know.
Maybe he might have had thousands. I know he preached on the steps of is it Delphi, or where they had
Delphi, the oracle or whatever.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Anyway.
It doesn't matter. So now we're going to talk about. Coda, did you have anything you wanted to say about any of that?
No, I don't have much to say.
Okay, you enjoying yourself?
Yeah.
Good.
The only thing I had a comment on was something people are disagreeing in the comments. I had to chip in, but I don't know if it's relevant to the show. Someone's saying you don't need a specific worldview to do science. I think I agree, because imagine like playing checkers, right? Like, do you have to believe that the rules of checkers are objectively true to play it, or can you just follow the rules to engage in the activity?
Correct.
I mean, we made up the rules anyway, so I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to. Like I said at the first, it doesn't matter how we say. We're gonna talk about how it's separated, but as far as I'm concerned, it's all just the scientific methodology.
I was gonna mention that earlier. I was like, there's people out there who think there has to be something certain in order for certainty. Like, we can obtain certainty because
the problem of the criterion. The problem of the criterion.
Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But there has to be something absolute in order, that actualizes absolute truth somehow, and it manifests it.
This is exactly what Sextus Empiricus was talking about. It's one of the main skeptical problems in Pyrrhonism, that we may not fucking have a criteria to know anything deductively or inductively, which is crazy. I loved how that philosopher that I interviewed explained that to us. That was a really good explanation of his, and I love it. There's two ways that the problem of the criterion has been brought up. One is a more modern way, and the other one is Sextus Empiricus's way, and he was a Pyrrhonistic skeptic. Um, so anyway, we won't go too far off into that.
Yeah.
We've covered that on so many shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. So during the 19th century, many distinguishing characteristics of contemporary modern science began to take shape. These included the transformation of the life and physical sciences, frequent use of precision instruments, emergence of terms such as biologist, physicist, scientist, increased professionalization of those studying these things. Scientists gained cultural authority over many dimensions of society, industrialization of numerous countries, thriving of popular science writings, and emergence of science journals. So all of this was happening. So during the late 19th century, psychology also emerged as a separate discipline from philosophy when Wilhelm Wundt founded the first laboratory for psychological research in 1879. I will be talking a lot about Wundt and James and Jung in my psychology series that will be coming up, so I won't go too far into Wundt right now, but he will be
Nice.
covered a lot when I go through my psychology series, which will be soon. It will be within the next few months. We'll get there. So during and the next one's going to be obvious to people, but during the mid 19th century, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace independently proposed the theory of evolution by natural selection in 1858, which explained how different plants and animals originated and evolved. Their theory was set out in detail in Darwin's book The Origin of Species. Separately, Gregor Mendel presented his paper Experiments on Plant Hybridization in 1865, which outlined the principles of biological inheritance, serving as the basis for modern genetics. Interesting. Gregor Mendel, Experiments on Plant Hybridization, serving for the basis for modern genetics. Very important.
Mm-hmm.
So early in the 19th century, John Dalton suggested the modern atomic theory based on Democritus's original idea of indivisible particles called atoms.
Mm-hmm.
Another way of calling back to the ancient Greeks, right?
Mm-hmm. He was a pre-Socratic. He was
Chill.
not a Socratic. He was a pre-Socratic, so they're referring to even those.
Democritus was a pre-Socratic, right?
Yes, with
Yeah, that's
Lucidus,
right.
I think, or Leucippus. I think was his teacher.
Leucippus. Yeah.
Leucippus, yeah.
I thought Aristotle was the first one who thought atoms loved the earth, or he didn't come up with the atom then, right?
He thought that what we call nowadays as gravity, he called an object's love or desire to go towards the earth. Like things would fall because they had a natural, not entelechy, but some kind of the similar thought process, just a natural urge to be one with the earth.
Well, at
I
least you
don't
got it
think.
right on being a constant thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was A for effort, I guess. But yeah, but it was Democritus,
Mhm.
whatever,
It don't matter.
who and perhaps even Leucippus first, who came up that we're just atoms in the void. Marcus Aurelius was like, shit, is Democritus right? Like, are we just atoms in the void, or are there gods? Well, I'm going to live in a way that satisfies both, yada, yada, yada. So Democritus was really a material, like beginning of materialism, specifically, I would say, as a philosophical thought or domain.
Okay. So he really was one of the first physicalists then.
Yeah.
Yeah, or at least a naturalist. And metaphysically, he probably wouldn't have said everything is natural, I would say. Because we can go down levels. We can talk metaphysically about natural or unnatural or supernatural, and then we can move down a level to ontology and say physical or material, whatever you want. It's just
all of those guys. All of those guys believed in gods, except maybe Democritus. Honestly, I'm not sure, but for the most part, Anaximander, all of Thales, they all believed in gods. So there was more than just the physical and quote natural. There was also supernatural in their thought process.
What about SPA? Did they have any?
Oh yeah. Plato. Socrates went down to Piraeus in the Republic for a religious sacrilege. He was going down to pray to the gods. all those guys believed in supernatural realm of the forms. Aristotle, on the other hand, he believed in gods or a god, not sure, but he wasn't as much of the woo-woo realm of the forms, as
Mhm.
given the famous picture where he's pointing down to the ground and Plato's pointing up to the realm of the forms.
Yeah.
But and then we have, well,
Keep
I'll
going,
stop.
dude. I love it.
Thomas Aquinas tried to baptize Aristotle. And so Aristotle did kind of have those first cause kind of religious divine notions going on. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't necessarily call him a monist or a materialist in any sense, but
Right.
I think he also believed reason was kind of woo woo,
Well, we can't
supernatural.
ask him, but we can assume. I wish we.
Logos, right? He came
Yeah,
up with
logos.
or they did.
Yes, that's Aristotle is logos. Logos, pathos,
So
and ethos, the three methods of rhetoric, and also things like you know techne and episteme and phronesis and all that other stuff that plays into his shit. I don't remember all of it because I'm not like an Aristotle obsessor, but I still think he's brilliant, obviously. But Plato might have been the most brilliant of them all. Anyway, Coda,
yep.
did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Because we kind of got philosophy there, and that may be your take.
Oh no, I don't have much to add at all.
Okay.
Just
Have you
jump
ever
in
said?
whenever you want.
Yeah, you can jump
For
in. But
sure, for sure.
have you?
Oh
What's that?
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, just for sure, yeah.
Oh, for sure. Have you ever? Did you ever get interested in Greek philosophy?
I've never actually studied ancient philosophy, so it's a blind
Mm,
spot for me. But
okay.
when I hear about Platonism, I have mixed feelings about it, but there's some things that I hear about it that make me excited to look into it.
Yeah, well, we can always get into that. Me and Perry have done shows on this stuff, and we don't remember everything, but I mean, we're more than welcome to cover this ancient philosophy anytime that we
Yeah,
need
that'd be
to.
sick.
Yeah, yeah, we can do it. Let me start this again. Perry, you good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So early in the 19th century, John Dalton suggested that the modern theory based on Democritus's original idea of indivisible particles called atoms. The laws of conservation of energy, conservation of momentum, and conservation of mass suggested a highly stable universe where there could be little loss of resources. However, with the advent of the steam engine and the Industrial Revolution, there was an increased understanding that not all forms of energy have the same energy qualities, the ease of conversion to useful work or to another form of energy. So, energy quality is like the ease of the conversion of useful work. And energy is work over time. Energy is also mass, E equals mc squared. They're basically the same thing. They interchange with each other. Um, so this realization about the energy qualities, instead of just being like a static universe, led to the development of the laws of thermodynamics about heat and energy, in which the free energy of the universe is seen as a constantly declining thing. The entropy of a closed universe increases over time. We don't know if we're in a closed universe, so we're going to pass that on. Um, we have learned things since then. The electromagnetic theory by Maxwell was established in the 19th century, and it was also taught of by the works of I can't pronounce this guy, Hans Christian Ørsted, and Andre Marie Ampere, Faraday, Maxwell, Heaviside, and Heinrich Hertz. The new theory raised questions that could not easily be answered using Newton's framework. The discovery of X rays inspired the discovery of radioactivity by Henry Becquerel and Marie Curie in 1896. Marie Curie then became the first person to win two Nobel Prizes. In the next year came the discovery of the first subatomic particle, the electron. So the electron was discovered in 1897. So that's a big thing that happened at the end of the 1800s. That pretty much changed our entire understanding of what a static universe meant or what any of this meant. So it's really interesting that all of that happened so quickly. Like science was nothing, and then boom, 200 years. It's like enormous. It's just like it's how evolution works, I guess. Did you guys want me to keep going over history, or do we need to cover something else that y'all are thinking about?
Yeah. I mean, unless someone has different, I guess it might be interesting to go over perhaps different theories on like why the scientific history like developed the way it did when it did. Um,
We can talk about that. We know that, I mean, well, we know that science would undoubtedly start from the church because the church in the early days had a death grip on everything in the world.
yeah,
You know what I
Yep.
mean? So, I mean, we get science and everything like that from the church and their academies. Only when I've just recently been talking about it in the 19th century did it really start to separate, you know? Um,
hmm
let's see. I don't know. It's a good question. Like, what if, what if they,
right,
what if, I don't know if this is exactly what you were getting at, but like, what if Einstein didn't discover the special relativity? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, where would we be if that happened differently? Or what if they had discovered the electron when Hume was alive? Where would we be?
yeah. Or
So,
perhaps there's like sociological models to apply, like why did these ideas proliferate in these eras, et cetera, et cetera.
oh, okay. I don't know.
Hmm
Thomas Kuhn had an idea that it was all about paradigms, that
Yeah,
everything was a scientific paradigm, and the old would replace the new. I mean, excuse me, the new would replace the old, and science wasn't looked at in any other way than just a paradigm shift to a paradigm shift to a paradigm shift, and
yeah,
all these paradigms were just based on the science of the time. You know.
yeah. It's interesting. I guess that can be returned to if there's ever like things about like history or sociology. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I always find that super interesting when it comes to this sort of thing,
Yeah.
like the cultural originations of these ideas.
Mm-hmm. Perry, I'm just checking if you're still
Now,
with us.
now,
Just checking if you're still with us.
Mr. Laplace, where
Oh,
does God fit into this equation? Well, sir, there is no need for God. You're able to do the math and learn about how things work without him.
yeah.
Napoleon
Is that
being
what?
flabbergasted.
Yeah, that's what Laplace supposedly said to Napoleon, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. We don't hear too much about him when we talk about philosophy, but I mean, he was a scientist. I would imagine more so than anything. Did he? I wonder if he came up with anything of note other than just like some philosophical ideas.
I always equivocate Descartes' demon with Laplace's demon
Yeah, Laplace's demon is like knowing every position of every atom in the universe.
and its velocity.
And its velocity and momentum and everything that you can't know with the Heisenberg uncertainty principle right now. Like basically just getting rid of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and being able to know waves and particles as they are without having any randomness to it. That would be crazy. We would have to be some kind of omniscient, like Kardashev 6 light being
Yeah.
to do that. I mean, I don't know.
That's what I equivocate. I equivocate Laplace's demon with omniscience, essentially. Right.
Yep, it would be. So let's. Ooh, okay. We're not much further, and then we can talk about the branches of science. But I mean, I may end this on the history of science. We'll see how much. It's not too much further I have to read for us, and I do want to get it out there because this stuff it needs to be known. But when we start talking about the branches of science, we're gonna get a little bit deeper into each one, and then what we'll do after the scientific methodology is we'll go through the branches of science, and then we'll go through like different types of chemistry, different types of physics, different types of we'll jump around. We won't go too deep into any one of them, but we'll jump around and definitely get an idea.
Oh,
So
did you want to call in, Joshua?
Yeah, Joshua's been
Let's see.
asking, do we? Is that a thing on the show? Do people call in?
how do I do it, Perry? Perry, you hear me?
And only the void responded.
Perry,
For Perry was gone. Oh
Perry's.
no.
I don't know how to invite people, so I'm gonna have to wait until Perry comes back to know how to invite you, Josh. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Um,
Darkness approaches.
I am gonna finish. I'm gonna finish here in a second, even if Perry has to rejoin. He'll be back in a second.
Yeah.
Oh, looks like we got him.
Ah, there he
Yeah.
is.
Yeah,
There
just
he
you'll
is.
have
He
to
is here.
copy paste the call-in link on YouTube in your YouTube chat. I tried to do that and then I disconnected myself doing so. So,
Cool.
but if you don't want callers, also I think
Well, we
also
need
is
to
just as
finish.
good.
We need to finish what I was talking about so I can
Yeah,
have my
let's
because
do
this
it.
episode is meant to be watched by people to be, you know, as academic as we can be. Not
For
perfect.
sure.
Let's keep going here, and then when we get at the end, I will try to send out some invites and get that fixed because I'm not even on my YouTube channel right now. I didn't want to have to like mute it and it slow down my internet connection and shit. Didn't want to have multiple things up.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, let's talk about the 20th century because we know about the 19th century, right? We know it ended with Marie Curie and the discovery of the electron. So, in the first half of the 20th century, the development of antibiotics and artificial fertilizers improved human living standards drastically globally. Harmful environmental issues such as ozone depletion, ocean acidification, eutrophication, and climate change came to the public's attention and caused the onset of environmental studies. During this period, scientific experimentation became increasingly larger in scale and funding. The extensive technological innovation stimulated by World War I, World War II, and the Cold War led to competitions between global powers such as space race and the nuclear arms race. Substantial international collaborations were also made despite arms conflicts, obviously. In the late 20th century, active recruitment of women and elimination of sex discrimination greatly increased the number of women scientists, but large gender disparities remained in some fields. The discovery of the the cosmic microwave background in 1964 led to a rejection of the steady state model of the universe, where everything was static, in favor of the Big Bang, which was a theory by Georges Lamatiere. Lamatiere? I can't pronounce it. If you guys can, good luck. um, anyway, uh, the century saw fundamental changes within scientific disciplines. Evolution became a unified theory in the early 20th century when the modern synthesis reconciled Darwinian evolution with classical genetics. Like we talked about genetics earlier. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity and the development of quantum mechanics complement classical mechanics to describe physics in extreme lengths, times, and gravity. Widespread use of integrated circuits in the last quarter of the 20th century, combined with communication satellites, led to a revolution in information technology and the rise of the internet and mobile computing. The need for mass systemization of long, intertwined causal chains and large amounts of data led to the rise of the fields of system theory and computer-assisted scientific modeling. That's why we can do things scientifically. And really quick, and I'll be done with this, the 21st century, the Human Genome Project was completed in 2003 by identifying and mapping all of the genes of the human genome. The genome is like the organism's spreadsheet of how the genetic makeup works for that organism or that population of organisms. So there's the human genome, there's the snake genome. Everything has its own genome. Every species. I think that's correct. I am not an evolutionary biologist, but I think that's correct. And two species are different when they can't interbreed. That's when you have a separate set of species when they can't interbreed. Um, the first the first induced pluri now this is a word I haven't ever heard of before. The first induced pluripotent human stem cells were made in 2006, allowing adult cells to be transformed into stem cells and turn into any cell found in the body. Ooh, that's cool. Why don't we do more? I think. Oh, that's right. That's because religious nuts hate that shit, don't they?
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of Sam Harris's critiques on Christianity and not on Islam, because Islam doesn't have an issue with that, whereas Christianity kind
Yeah.
of halts us from being able to do that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. So tidy this up real quick, and then we'll get to just talking about random shit. We'll talk some more about branches of science, but it won't be so much on like a history thing. The Human Genome Project 2003, stem cells 2006, the Higgs boson in 2013. Uh, in 2015 we discovered gravitational waves predicted by general relativity a century before they were first observed, and in 2019 we have the first view from Event Horizon Telescope of our Sagittarius A's black hole's accretion disk. We actually have a picture of that. If you go on Wikipedia and look on the right, go down to 21st century in history, you can see the picture of the black hole's accretion disk. It's really cool. It's pretty much how we describe them in science, in nature. So that's pretty much the history, half of the history of science since the Renaissance. Um, what do you think is the most important invention through all of that, Perry?
Ooh.
Or pick a time.
Well,
Pick a time
the most significant change was that almost certainly Copernicus. And it's funny because, like you were saying earlier, the church ruled everything. His book was called A Scientific Revolution on the Heavenly Bodies.
Mm-hmm.
He still believed, and so did Galileo, supposedly, science teaches you about the heavens, and religion teaches you how to go to heaven. Or science teaches you how the heavens go, and then religion teaches you how to go to heaven, right? And so it was with the hold of the church and their political power, I would say, that was what cut the Gordian knot, so to speak, and really transitioned us. And that's why they call it the Copernican Revolution, right?
So I guess I would
say that's the most significant.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I mean, it's the whole reason why we have any idea of space today is because him and Galileo were brave enough to challenge the church, right?
Yep. And Galileo suffered a bunch, like 17 years of house arrest because of it.
That's fucking insane. What do you want to say, Coda?
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, God bless.
Yeah, God bless everyone.
By the way, just for anybody watching this show in the future or now, whenever, we love Christians. We just
of course
are at odds with the religion and with the idea of God. And there's no problem ever about talking through those things. Most Christians don't like it. They don't want to talk about that kind of thing. But we are always open to it. So if you ever feel like...
I don't love all Christians. I don't love all people.
I love all people. I love Christians.
I have pity for all people at bare minimum, and love for the select few who earn it.
I see.
But
yeah.
That's neutral. That's to remain at a neutral spot, not at a maleficent.
Okay, so two of us love Christians and one of us is neutral about Christians.
There's some Christians that I love. There's a good handful of Christians that I love. But my point is not being the label that makes me love you or not. It's your actions, and if you have good service to fellow humanity, that's who I love.
I agree with that. I agree with that. We should all be working towards each other's benefit and pleasure.
And if you're selfish, I pity you at minimum, at best, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's the best. It's the best. If you want to be really selfish, then you make everything around you better so that you can have a better life.
Yes, if it's selfishness without any altruism incorporated.
That's right. Yep. It's always the best idea to make the well-being of those around you and your surrounding area better, because that means your life gets better. So imagine if more than 9 or 10% of people voted in local elections.
Even if it didn't make my life better, I think you still ought to do that, even if it means that your life will be detrimented. I think that you should do it for its own sake, not as a means to an end. That's what I've truly found is the only, as a guy who doesn't really believe in God, for example, I create my own religious values, and that's one of them. For its own sake. Doing something for its own sake.
Yeah, we can talk. We can keep talking about that because I think if we talk about religion along with science, we can explain how we got out of the death grip of
True.
dogmatism.
Sure. Yeah.
True.
So
And it's kind of
yeah.
also, like I said earlier, when Napoleon asked, where's God in the equation? Is he the F here? Is he the X? What is it? He's not needed. So that was a big turning point in terms of the relationship between religion and science, I would say. Uh,
is that
and Galileo,
you could operate without the assumption and everything still works.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just like Joshua was asking earlier. What foundations do you have to do? You could you can have there's perhaps an infinitude of different first principles, and we could still do the same science
Yeah.
in theory.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Right.
true.
I mean, ultimately, rules and examples support each other. I think the reason why the rules of science are such a popular procedure to follow is because they have proven themselves to be relatively reliable in the majority of people's worldviews. So, regardless of whether we're realists or anti realists, that is a pretty convincing sell.
Yeah. I mean, we can't deny our senses and we can't deny medicine, you know? Denying medicine would be very bad for our species. So that in a way forces us to care about science is that we know that medicine exists and
I
that
don't think a lot of us.
Go ahead.
I mean, a lot of us wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for medicine. No,
Yeah, exactly.
is that
We
a
would have
hot
died
take?
we would have died in childbirth.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, because a majority of people before a certain time did die in childbirth.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know when that was, but there was a time when lots of
You
motherfuckers were
you'd
dying.
be ancient. You'd be ancient as a 35, 36-year-old Thomas.
Yeah.
Like you'd be one of the oldest in the community.
Old bitch. I feel old. No, I'm just kidding. I feel fat. I do feel that. God, I
I
gotta
feel
lose
both those things as well.
old and
Many
fat. Yeah,
times. Yeah.
it's a thing. So, I'm fine with continuing talking on the show. We have gone for an hour. Perry, are you okay, or are you still kind of
I'm
dealing?
I'm I'm ready to head home and
Okay. All right. Well,
yeah, and see if the
let's
Wi-Fi has come back
let me
on.
get to that
So
screen. Hang on a second. Get to the screen where I can end the broadcast. All right, everybody. We love you. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us. Thanks, Dakota. Thanks
Thank
to Perry.
you.
And please subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Thomas Panther at the Pangburn Universe. Please go and subscribe to Pangburn at YouTube and Pangburn on Rumble. And please join us on Discord. The link will be on the YouTube channel, Pangburn. Just Pangburn, no philosophy or anything, just Pangburn. You'll find it. And come join us on the Discord and hang out if you want to. Anyway, thank you guys. See ya.
see ya.
See you.